We're still not showing live. It's still not,
No, it takes, there's a lag there.
oh, so you're quicker than the lag.
Yeah.
Very good. I would not
We
be
are back from our in-camera session, and we'll resume questioning and questions from council members. Councillor Reinhardt.
Thanks. I have a question about the development agreement process. Is there any way to make that take less time than 6 months? I understand there's probably a lot involved in that, but is it possible to have that take less time?
Typically, it takes around 4 to 6 months. Again, it's up to, there's some of the process is under staff to do and some is under the developer. If we're, for example, we have I don't know if I can mention this, that certain development, but we did receive initially already, for example, a water study that was done. So that reduces the amount of reduces the time, for example, of what was done, of the process of the development agreement. Us as planners, again, as Tom already mentioned, we are not necessarily regulating septics, but we can send letters, or water, but we can send letters to external agencies to have them look at the development and see if, for example, there's enough emergency access that is it sufficient emergency access? Are we getting the letters from Nova Scotia environment or any type of department that regulates septics and see, yes, it's done. So there's different, if we're getting all the documents done, we can proceed into a public information session. So that's what's part of the development agreement is also public input. And going into public information session, we're receiving some of the questions and I guess the input that we received in that session. Staff is writing a report and we're going to the Planning Advisory Committee with all the information that we received from the external agencies, the information that we received from the developer, and then where the PAC provides recommendations to council to consider for first reading or second reading. And there's, of course, the public hearing as well before second reading. Again, the process can be short or it could be lengthy. It really depends on what requirements are, what are the requirements, and whether we receive the sufficient information in a timely manner. But it's around 4 to 6 months. There's one development agreement that we're working on that it's not as lengthy as a 4 months process to go. Yeah.
Just to add to what Ella has stated, yeah, generally it can't be much shorter than that, and that's primarily driven by the public process that's required. There's a public hearing, there's a public information session, there are notice requirements as part of that. Then there's multiple steps with the different readings that council has to do, and there's time in between those. It's all geared around the public having appropriate notice and an opportunity to be involved and understand it. So yeah, not much shorter than that.
Questions? Councillor Smith.
If the second project, the Bearland Condominium project, were to be given more time, as suggested by the CAO, there's still nothing in place that would actually, like the implication is that it'll be a better project if there's more time.
Those are the words of the developer.
Right, but there's been no plan, no real commitment. Like, is there any way that we could work with that developer if there's that much more time allotted? And some of the concerns I have about that development is it's very close to a school. And I would like to see, I mean, I think we all want to see more oversight of developments, and I would like to see a better development there. But what leeway do we have as a municipality to work with the developer if he were given more time?
So I certainly don't want to leave the impression that developers don't work with us, because a lot do. Some don't, but most have some input with us. And so the difference really is the development agreement process requires it. They're mandated to have a very prescriptive process, and as Rita Nell has indicated, it goes, through PAC, public information, public hearing, couple of appearances before council, so it's very prescriptive. Can we sit here and say that that a developer will necessarily engage with us on things? No. Is it likely? Probably. Are they going to have to engage with other departments? Yes. So Public Works has to give road access, so that still has to be done. Department of Environment still has to give septic approvals, so that has to be done. If they're pulling out of one well beyond a certain amount, Department of Environment has to give that too. And then the Department of Environment has provisions related to wetlands and water, wet areas and all of those things. So there isn't that there's no level of oversight, it's the interaction with us. And if he's suggesting he'll do it and you accept him at his word, then we'll see what happens. But the development agreement requires it, requires the interaction, and it requires an agreement that's approved by council.
Deputy Mayor Vino.
Can I ask for clarification on a possible example? If the three motions put forward by the admin department passes today, if somebody applies for a building permit in September of 2026, how does that relate to the first motion with having 12 months to commence the project? Because they've applied for a building permit in September 2026, but they haven't built it yet. Do they fall under these regulations?
So the way that it's worded, draft an amendment to cluster development regulations to include a section that would permit developers a specified time period to get a building permit for a cluster development, and provided that the construction commences within 12 months after the date of the permit. So they have to do both. They'd have to get a building permit and commence construction within 12 months of getting the building permit. And if they meet both of those requirements, then they would be considered a non-conforming use and not subject to the regulations.
And even though it would continue into 2027 by the time they would complete the project?
Yeah, so the date triggers for the building permit, and then the construction triggers 1 year. Or any time chosen by council. We suggested a year. It's because it doesn't have to be done, it just has to be commenced.
Questions? Okay. Is Councillor Moore?
I'm a little confused about all these motions. So basically, options 1, 2, and 3 is basically saying all of that, but in one motion, 11.2.1, correct?
No. So 11.2.1 are my recommendations on how to address the lack of a non-conforming provision
Okay.
for cluster developments,
Yeah.
and how to address Mr. Oikel's request for an extension
Right.
to the existing non-conforming section that relates to phase development condominiums. And the third one just says, if you change the date of December 31st, 2025 to any other date, make both non-conforming clauses have the same date.
Okay. So what motions are we looking to put forward? Yeah. Yes.
Councillor Vino, or Deputy Mayor Vino is going to help us here.
If there's no further discussion, I'll put a motion on the floor, and that being the admin department motion in order to accommodate both the projects in question. To Mayor McLean-Weil and members of council, I move that municipal council direct staff to draft an amendment to the cluster development regulations to include a section that would permit developers a specified time period to get a building permit for a cluster development that is not a phased development. Construction commences within 12 months after the date of the permit. Said development will be recognized by council as non-conforming and therefore not subject to the regulations, and I so move.
We have a seconder for the motion. Councillor Bell. Now, the floor is open for discussion. All those in favor of the motion as presented indicate by raising their hands. Those opposed? Councillor DeLong, the motion is passed unanimously. Oh, sorry.
There was some who didn't raise. They're automatic.
If you fail to vote, it's a vote against in opposition. Okay. So I would like to clarify this for the record. Those opposed, please raise their hands. Councillor DeLong, Councillor Smith.
I don't want to vote against this part of the motion. Is it all together?
The motion on the floor is the first one.
Okay, I will vote in favor of it.
Okay. Could we clarify, all those in favor of the motion on the floor, please raise their hands. Those opposed, motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. Do we have someone who would propose the second motion? Councillor Moore.
To Mayor McLean-Wall and members of council, I move that municipal council direct staff to draft an amendment to the cluster development regulations at section 5.3.1 to change the date from December 31st, 2025 to December 31st, 2026. And I so move.
Do we have a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Councillor Burns. Discussion on the motion. All those in favor of the motion as presented signify by raising their hands. Those opposed, Councillor Reinhardt, Councillor DeLong, and Councillor Smith. Motion is carried. The third motion, would someone propose that? Councillor Bell? Thank you.
To Mayor McLean-Weil and members of council, I move that municipal council direct staff to set the grandfathering clause at section 5.3.1 be it the current December 31st, 2025, or the recommended December 31st, 2026, to also be the date set for the proposed grandfathering clause for cluster development. I so move.
Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hubley. Is there discussion on the motion? Councillor Reinhardt.
Just to clarify for everyone who might be listening too, so this motion is just to make the dates the same.
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
All those in favor of the motion signify by raising their hands. Those opposed, Councillor DeLong and Councillor Smith. Motion is carried. Thank you, everyone.
And so, Reed, would we be in a position to be able to return with these amendments to the second council meeting in April?
Yep, yes.
So we will plan to bring the revised draft back to council, the second council meeting in April, at which time council will have to deal with the current first reading that exists and the substantial revisions, and then the first reading of the revised document. Okay, thank you.
That was a lot, I know, for everyone, but we will move on the agenda to, I'm a little lost on this as well. 10.2, thank you. We'll move to 10.2.1, which is the REMO 2025-2026 draft operating budget. Our deputy CAO will lead us on this.
Good morning, council members. So I believe most council members are familiar with the process for approving the REMO budget. We did have an all-council meeting with all 5 of the municipal partners in the REMO organization to discuss some options that were before us. But you have an advisory committee that works across the region to give advice to staff and perform functions that are granted to it in the intermunicipal agreement. Included in that is a responsibility to recommend a budget. There was a proposal last year to increase the staffing complement from 1 to 2, which passed, but one of the partner units voted against it, which is unusual. Normally, there's unanimous support for the budget. So the District of Chester raised some concerns, and there have been lengthy discussions from that point. This year's budget included 2 options proposed by staff that were reviewed at the all-council meeting. Essentially, one option included 2 regional staff members, and the second option included 1 regional staff member and then 3 local coordinators, which would be placed within individual municipalities. In the interim period between that meeting and the meeting that included of the advisory committee to discuss the budget, Chester and some of our partners proposed a third option, which included the 2 regional positions, and then also included the District of Chester hiring a full-time local emergency coordinator. So they would be based out of Chester, they will be paid by Chester, but 1/3 of that position would be billed to the total REMO cost, so added to the REMO budget, recognizing that that position will be doing some local pre-planning work that is normally done by the region and will also be available for activations and emergencies, and helping with regional training as well. At the advisory committee meeting, it was discussed and was recommended forward. I can report that the town of Bridgewater approved it last night. And the remaining units are slated in the next week or so to address the question. Just from a staff perspective, I would strongly endorse, not just because we've been able to find a regional compromise, but the third option provides us 3 staff members in the region who are dedicated to emergency management. So they'll have a higher level of training than those of us such as myself who participate in emergency management and emergency response, but it's not my background. And so I'm learning processes as I work on the job. These are folks that have trained in it and live and breathe it in a very different way. So any option that proposes more of those has some real strength to it, and staff can fully endorse this. Just speaking quickly to the budget implications, the total budget ask would be $405,000. This is because we are the host units. The gross cost of this is included in our budget. The net impact once we receive the partner contributions makes MODL's contribution to REMO $201,202.13. So this includes the base budget, and it also includes 1/3 of a position that Chester will be billing that is then distributed based on uniform assessment to all 5 of the units that are participating in REMO. I'd be very happy to answer specific questions if anything wasn't clear in that quick overview.
Just before we open the floor, I would like to say that this did take a lot of effort from staff, particularly in trying to find some common ground that we could stay together as a unit. And I think underlying all the discussions was a belief that collectively we would be better served by working as one unit with all the contributors staying at the table. And that was a very difficult effort to find how we could do that, given the concerns that were raised by one of the units. So I think this is a compromise agreement, and I think to the point that's been raised, we actually have now more expertise in this area, and I think that's to the benefit of us all. So I'm really happy that we were able to take the extra time to find the common ground. There are still issues around governance that we will have to deal with REMO, but to actually get a budget, and I know it's late date for this, but we do have it. And I will open the floor if there are questions on this. Hearing none, could someone put the motion on the floor, please? Councillor Hubley.
Thank you. To Mayor McLean-Weil and members of council, I move that Municipal Council accept the recommendation of the Regional Emergency Management Organization Advisory Committee and approve option 3 of the 2025-2026 draft budget options totaling $405,417.06, with the municipality's contribution being $201,202.13.
Do we have a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Councillor Burns. Discussion on the motion? All those in favor signify by raising their hands. Those opposed, motion is carried unanimously. We will move to agenda item 10.3.1, which is the draft anti-racism and diversity plan. So we'll invite our staff members to come forward. And I will say we'll deal with this and then we'll break for lunch.
Good morning, everyone. I will make this relatively brief, just to give majority of the time for questions. So I'm going to assume everyone had an opportunity to review the draft plan. I think this will be my first official opportunity to present to council a draft plan. So I would like to introduce myself to those listening in, and well, if we had any more community members in the audience currently. So as your local Julia Roberts, as I often like to call myself, I fell in love and moved to the South Shore. Being a part of this community for over 3 years, I have been adopted by a Mi'kmaq uncle, a Hebs Cross grandma, and a sister from Treehouse community. I have found belonging through these relationships, but unfortunately, this is not the only reality. In this work, in my life, in the Dismantling Racism and Hate Act, recognizing that underserved and underrepresented individuals and communities in Nova Scotia experience harmful and unjustifiable inequities and disparities because of systemic hate, inequity, and racism. This is my work. This is your work, and this is our work, to not only help people love this community, but to co-create a community that loves all of us back, us being whoever you are, what makes you an individual. As we do this work of creating equity and belonging, this is not just directed at one or two groups that people often think that is. These are all the groups that feel that aren't reflected or taken into consideration, whether that be in policy, procedure, in decision-making, etc. This is my first time presenting to you, as said, so this is why you get this prologue, because I want to officially introduce myself as Jem, your neighbor and your regional anti-racism and diversity coordinator. For context, this draft plan was originally birthed from the Provincial Dismantling Racism and Hate Act from 2022, and from there an intermunicipal agreement was created to have a regional plan, and by legislation is due on April 1st, so relatively soon. And through this agreement, my role was birthed. As previously mentioned, this is to focus on underrepresented and underserved individuals and communities. So in the draft plan, you will see approaches on how we do this work, meaning the communities within community at large we will continuously engage with, as well as the frameworks leaned upon, because this is social change, as well as the values and that we share both in the accessibility plan and in this plan, because there is intersectionality. It is important to note that as we do this work, we will continue to centralize decision-making with these voices, and they are continuously at the forefront. So this is why the plan is coming to you in its draft form, with an additional 50 draft action items that are not reflected in the plan, but are in the background and ready for the committee to review. And because we are waiting to ensure that the committee has an opportunity based on the terms of reference to review those action items, we will submit the plan as is in its draft form to meet the April 1st deadline, and with the committee review those action items, and at a later date, we will submit the final plan with the reflective regional items. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. In the plan itself, you'll see both the introduction, you'll see acknowledgements that is roughly there, a letter from mayors and wardens, that will be added specifically in the accessibility plan and in my plan once it's passed. And then the additional items you'll see is our partners, because this is community work. So you'll see schools, you'll see libraries, community centers, Nova Scotia Health, etc. So if you see anything that is missing, this is just the start of the work. This is a living document that will iterate and change, just so that we're focusing not necessarily on building a document that we have to adhere to, but we are held accountable, but we will shift based on the needs of community as they arise. So thank you, and any questions?
It's open to council. I could just kick that off because I think it will be helpful, and you I think addressed this a little bit in your last comments about, because the fact that the committee was just appointed.
Yes.
And we had to submit a draft. How do you see that proceeding, and what timeline would be involved in bringing forward those recommendations that would go into a final draft?
Yes, definitely. So it's two-part. Given the essence of time, we did start to do some engagement in community. So one of the main questions that we've asked persons throughout the county is, what does belonging mean? And that has allowed for us to see some of either the barriers or issues, and we created our focus areas around those specifically, but also through conversations that we've had within municipalities with staff and understanding what things can we do internally, both internally from a mental model shift or education perspective, but also from a municipal standpoint. Those are the things that we've used to draft those 50+ action items that we have and ready to present to the committee to kind of create an off-ramp. But additionally, we'll engage with them once we have approval from all 5 councils. And by the end of this month, that should be finalized. And it's really based on everybody's availability. So hopefully within the next 2 to 3 weeks, we'll have a date in the books to start review. And in an ideal world, first week of May, we would have a final plan to go forward. But honestly, it's really based on the availability of everybody.
Councillor Brooks.
Thank you. This might be a question for the CAO, but before this was downloaded to the municipality from the province, was there community outcry for this committee to be created? And what is the history of this? I understand it's a provincial download, but much like the issue we were dealing with yesterday and we'll deal with the land use, was this something that the community was asking for? And I'll just follow it up quickly by saying that I met with the RCMP last week to try to tease out the amount of racially motivated assaults or incidents that are happening in our municipality. And I was very pleased to hear that there were almost none. So I'm just trying to get a sense of where we're going with this and what the community was asking for.
Thank you for the question through the mayor. So I can give some background. So I think it would be fair to say that the County of Kings was a leader in this province on taking steps towards dealing with this type of issue, and it came out of an FCM conference that was held in Vancouver, I think in the early 2000s. And so Kings County had a dedicated committee created to deal with equity, anti-racism, hate, all of those things that are the subject of this legislation, well before the legislation was ever contemplated by the province. And other municipal units picked up on that right across the country and were moving forward in their own fashion. When the legislation was introduced, some municipal units created their own committees to address it, like the town of Bridgewater. And then it was, I think, generally accepted that this type of issue has to be dealt with regionally, more effective regionally. And that's what led to the sort of the current creation of the committee and the plan, which is an overarching approach with individual units being responsible for moving parts forward. So I think there was, and there has been, a groundswell of activity that's identifiable through actions of certain municipalities that culminated in the creation of the legislation. And then when the legislation was created, it became prescriptive to do certain things like create a create a plan, create a committee. There was the option to go regional, which we adopted here, and then continue to move forward. So it's a bit of a non-answer, but it's about the best I can give at this point.
So just to clarify quickly, that was from Kings. That was not us. We were following the lead of another municipality. Is that correct?
So this was when I was with King, so that would have been early 2000.
And were they experiencing some serious racial issues at that time in Kings County?
There were certainly issues that were identified, and those were identified in different areas of the province. But it was the Race Relations and Anti-Discrimination Committee hosted representatives from all across the province once annually, typically at Acadia University, and had a number of workshops, all aimed at addressing and trying to eliminate hate, anti-discrimination, all those types of issues. But I don't have a lot of background on the actual legislation that the province introduced.
Okay, we have Deputy CAO, Alex.
Council first dealt with a request to create an anti-racism or an inclusion or an equity committee following the death of George Floyd at the hand of police officers in the United States. There was significant inquiries made to council members at that time, and council wanted to make a declaration and strike a committee. And staff actually recommended against striking a committee at that time for a couple of reasons. There was some concern that the municipality wasn't prepared to take any meaningful action, and so a declaration would be a hollow statement, and there was no understanding of how those issues being experienced internationally related locally. And so what council did was direct staff to work on a sort of getting our own internal house in order and understanding implicit biases that exist within the municipality at the staff level. Council started undertaking some training themselves. And some of our neighbors did proceed with committees, but did run into some issues, both in terms of having their own house in order, in terms of being able to receive input from those committees in an appropriate way. And also representation was a challenge because we are a region, even though we are 5 different municipal governments. So we are very happy to see a regional approach is now being pursued, because we think that that will do a better job of being representative of the different communities that historically haven't had access to council chambers in the past. So I believe the first time that this sort of version of the issue came to the fore was during the pandemic in response to national and international protests relating to police brutality and how police interacted with historically marginalized communities.
Councillor Smith and then Councillor DeLong.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised by the RCMP's response that there's been no incidents of hate or violence against racialized people during the election. There were people in my community who I know engaged the RCMP around harassment of them as visible minorities. And I won't say anything more about that because I don't want to identify them, but I think, we talked during strategic planning retreat about some of the racism that we heard at the doors because of anxieties around immigration. I definitely heard those. And sometimes, sometimes those anxieties were, there are valid pieces of that, but it would also quite frequently devolve into hateful stereotyping and racism. And the other thing I would mention is that in my canvassing during the election, I also heard a lot about temporary foreign workers and how people are very concerned about their inclusion in community. What can we do to make them feel more at home? Because they're very important parts of our communities. They provide fill a very important labor gap, and people are seeing that temporary foreign workers aren't always welcomed into our communities. So I would just put those forward as 3 examples of my experience in local communities of people asking for action on this, and I'm sure there's more.
Councillor DeLong.
Thank you very much. So I thank you for bringing this to us, Ms. Roberts. I attended one of your outreach sessions in Mahone Bay about belonging in Lunenburg County, and I know that you conducted a lot of outreach on this. So, I mean, outside of provincial download, why do you feel that this is an important document for our council?
So I will not try to over-personalize it. I want to answer both of your questions. I want to be very careful on what we look at as data in terms of how do we know that these things aren't happening. Historically, from a systemic racism standpoint, there are multiple systems at play here. So when we talk about the experience of a Black woman in healthcare, the experience of a Black man in the policing situations that we've seen several times, we as a community need to understand that if we don't see things reported, that is not directly reflective of what's happening on the ground. So in our plan, one of the things we have as a focus area is data and reporting. Data in itself can have its own nuances. So I want everyone to be very careful that when you see numbers in isolation, there's always a story. So don't take it and just say that that's everything. It's very dangerous sometimes to say, I spoke with XYZ and this is not happening if they are not first voice. And if somebody speaks on my behalf to say that you are not experiencing that, I feel to some extent that I am silent. So when we do this, we need to continuously put these underrepresented and underserved voices at the forefront when we're creating how we capture this data, how we're creating policy, how we're creating procedure. And I'm very grateful that you're having the conversations with the RCMP because it does take many hands, and I won't say for light work because it's not light work at all. It's going to be a long process, very tedious work, and I think one big metric in this is awareness, and it is almost a negative or inverse relation to the work that we're doing that has historically been seen in data tracking. Often if you see positive numbers, that means good, but if somebody realizes they understand or realize a lot less than they did prior to, that is a good thing in this work. We are a lot less aware of the experiences of other persons around us. We are not hearing all of the voices. So this is work that we continuously need to do as a collective and internally. So I feel like this is important because I want to feel okay to have a child here. If I want to put them in the school system, if I want them to feel okay they can go out in community. So I feel like it's important and work to start now so that we see the impacts not just tomorrow or next week, but over the next years.
It is hard work, yeah. It will take, it's generations of experience here that creates attitudes that we're dealing with now. And in the last, since I've become mayor, I've met with several, I would say on three different occasions with 3 different groups or people representing different groups, African, Nova Scotians, people from the Pride community. And in those cases, they were very poignant conversations about their lived experience. And as mayors, we've been asked to to meet because of some of the graffiti that's been placed on the rocks on the 103 and concerns around the message it conveys to a broad community traveling from here to Halifax about the nature of attitude and what that reflects about our community. So it is a complex process that we're entering into. It is very difficult conversations, and we need to start, and it will be hard to measure. You're right when you say about measurement. When we talk about accessibility, we can in many ways sometimes see gradual improvements that we make. Not in all cases, but there are tangible evidence. When we talk about hate, bias, whatever it be in our community, changing from where we are to where we think we need to be and where we want to be will be a long-term investment. So thank you for joining the process and helping to lead us in that. But I think you've pointed out some of the issues, and I think our counselors are also recognizing the connections that we need to make in evaluating where we are as a community. So we need to really think carefully about our steps forward. We need to be brave, and we need to really recognize that this will take a long, long time. Deputy Mayor Vino.
I don't have a question, more of a comment. Just because I'm not going to say we, just because I do not have lived experience in racism and discrimination doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I think by approving this today, it shows that we are working as a collective to uncover and eliminate discrimination and racism in all forms. And I'm really glad we've taken a Lunenburg County approach to this. I think it gives it more weight, it gives it more teeth, and shows that we're united and welcoming.
Other comment, Councillor Brooks.
I'm just going to say this last thing. As the only person, I think, and correct me anyone if I'm wrong, at this council table who has been a minority in both a Black and Latino community, I have yet to see a piece of government legislation to bring racial harmony to a community. Those relationships are built on experience, on working arm by arm, on helping each other out, on relying on each other, on learning each other's stories and experiences. That's how I have my friends, my friendships, and people of color all over the world and different backgrounds. So if I thought today that having a government policy and a government directive was going to bring racial harmony, I'd sign it 50 times over. I think it's well-intentioned. I don't think we are going to have the measurable results. I think telling somebody not to hate somebody is naive. I think we need to have reasons to learn how to pull together as a community and humans, all of our different backgrounds. So I respectfully understand what people are trying to do here. I think it's naive.
Other comments, questions? We do have a motion to put on the floor regarding the advisory committee and the draft report. Councillor Oikel.
Thank you. To Mayor McLean Weil and members of council, I move that municipal council accept the recommendations of the Anti-Racism and Anti-Discrimination Advisory Committee and approve the draft Anti-Racism and Diversity Plan for submission to the province of Nova Scotia, and further that the final Anti-Racism and Diversity Plan will be developed and submitted to council for approval, and I so move.
Do we have a seconder for the motion? Seconded by Councillor Smith. Further discussion on the motion? Councillor DeLong.
Sorry, just within the motion, it says based on the recommendation of the Anti-Racism and Anti-Discrimination Advisory Committee. The committee met, did it, or no?
No, the committee isn't currently in formation, which is why we are awaiting, based on terms of reference, for the committee to be finally formed, to meet, do final review, and then bring final report to council for final approval. So the draft is going in to meet the April 1st deadline, and then the final will include the actual action items.
Yeah, that makes sense to me, but it does say that this is based on the recommendation of the committee, so that's the part I don't understand, if the committee hasn't met. Oh.
I'll take ownership for that one. I should have reviewed the motions more carefully. It comes from our templated motion. So you can see the further that the final plan will be developed and submitted to the council for approval, that's the part that will go through the committee. So if we could strike the reference to the recommendation from the Anti-Racism Committee, that would make more sense and address Councillor DeLong's concern.
And I would approve that as Pat making the motion.
Does that cover it, Councillor DeLong? Okay, thank you. Any further comments? All those in favor signify by raising their hands. Those opposed? Councillor Brooks. Motion is carried. We will break for lunch, and thank you, Ms. Roberts, for your involvement, and we look forward to further reports.
Thank you.
We'll resume our council meeting, and we are waiting for Mr. Kennedy to arrive, but we will move to 10.5.1, which is tipping fees for residential brush. Tom.
Yeah, sorry, I'd like to call a point of order. I think that the decorum was breached before we broke for lunch. It was stated that council was being naive in its attempt to bring forward anti-racism and discrimination policy. Okay.
Just on this, point of order is raised during the time when the issue is
No, I believe
on
it
the
can be
table,
called at any
so
time.
I'm not going to consider that right now. We're moving on our agenda.
I'd like to ask, just for clarification, can a point of order be called at any time?
The issue you're raising, it relates to a conversation we already held, so I'm not going to consider that now.
As you wish.
Yep. We'll move on with our agenda. Okay, Mr. Kennedy, you're here. So, Fire and Emergency Services Committee and the Annual Funding and Regional Training Facility, please.
Okay, thank you, Your Worship, and Council. Yeah, so this was brought up at the last Fire and Services Committee meeting to have this recommendation put forward to Council for another $100,000 to be placed in that reserve fund for regional training facility. And in the package, it goes over the background on this proposed possible facility and what it could incur, what it could look like, and some of the different training availability it might have. So it's really a concept idea right now. It hasn't gone with any in-depth discussion with anybody. It's just some ideas that came forward that there is a requirement, there could be a need in the area for certain types of this training, and some of the facilities that make it closer to have it at hand. So that's kind of the basis of how this was done and the reason that it came forward over the last few years of discussion with Fire Services and the Fire Services Committee.
Questions? Councillor Hubley.
I don't really have a question. I think more of a comment. I had a meeting with Tri-District Fire Rescue on something else recently. Have there been any, I know it's probably too early to even ask, but has there been any locations looked at for this?
Not really hard locations, no. It was just a concept to have a localized training facility that had some of the aspects of training that aren't currently available in the municipality. So we have some spread out over different areas. There's a live fire trainer in La Have that needs a lot of work. So that's one of the biggest probably things that they're missing right now in the county is a good live fire training facility. I know La Have was looking at doing one, and they had priced a 3-unit certified from Draeger Industry that makes live fire trainers and live fire. So I had to have a three. He looked at it. He brought a price back to Lunenburg regionally, and it was like $540,000 for a 3-container unit just for live fire alone. So when you start dealing with that, the expense can get up pretty fast, and to get the certification and the requirements that you need to have to do it. So.
The suggestion of Tri-District, and I was hoping Wendy was still going to be busy reading something, was the old Lands and Forests Depot, the park, the Wildville Park. They thought that that would be an excellent location where it already had the hydrant and the water. And anyway, I know it's too early for the conversation, just planting the seed. I'm not looking at Wendy, just planting the seed. Thank you.
Councillor Bell.
In response to Councillor Hubley's question, Powder Mill Lake is located next to the Nova Scotia Firefighter School. They have remarkable equipment, but are still under very close scrutiny of Department of Environment because of the close proximity to the lake, because live fire sometimes involves using combustible products that have runoff. So while LaHave or some other group might want live fire training. That's one part of it. The other part is the environmental protections that go with it. So even if we have 300,000 setting in a little kitty, that's just going to be a start. I'm sure that Mr. Kennedy can tell you far more than that, but it's early in the discussions, but if we never put money aside, it's hard to know where we want to go. I don't think anyone has really decided that, but some people who get in the conversation early don't consider the other aspects that are close to it. And also, I didn't mention that live fire, if it's not propane, sometimes provides a lot of byproduct called smoke. And if you're in a residential area, you might want to take that into consideration. So I think it's not something we can answer today, but it's, when the time is right, there should be a good long discussion involving our fire service providers.
Other questions? I think this got, one of the issues that got raised during our budget discussions, and partly because we were putting money aside, it didn't really have a plan attached to it. Do you have any kind of indication how this might evolve in terms of the discussion around a training center? I know it's a sensitive issue, but.
Well, right now, it's like I say, it's just more of a concept, and we have had some, like, discussions around the table with Lunenburg Regional and different chiefs in the areas. So, you know, there could be like the live fire aspect could be a very important piece of it. That's more centrally located. So what else it could encompass, who knows? It's, we really haven't got into too many discussions on what it could be. But that's one of the aspects of it. You know, there's a lot of different static facilities around the area, but fire departments are also maintaining those and putting cost of their own funding into those to keep them operational too. So if it was a centralized area, it would limit some of that funding to have to go to that kind of stuff instead of what they could use for training or equipment or whatever, right, instead of maintaining training props. That's just my own personal opinion. And we have to have some more discussions with fire services to see what they might like to see other than that. Like I say, I don't have anything really concrete to offer because we really haven't had the discussion around it, and I can't really speak on their behalf around that.
Councillor DeLong.
Thank you. Do you have a sense of whether or not fire chiefs are generally in favor of this, or is that coming down?
So there's a mixture out there when you talk. Some say they would like to see some type of a facility, not like a full fire station maybe, or maybe not with responders in it. Who knows what's going to happen down the road? Our fire service is always evolving. It's always changing. Volunteer status and members are always changing. So, you know, we can't say nothing will happen or nothing can happen. But like I say, I don't have a crystal ball to say what it's going to be. Talking with fire chiefs, so some of them think that it definitely has an opportunity to provide some things that they don't currently have. And others think that we have things in the area that can help do some of the training that we presently do. So it's kind of a mixed bag. I can't give you a 100% answer because we haven't really sat down and had a really good discussion on it. I don't want to put words in any of the chiefs' mouths.
Councillor Smith, and then Deputy CAO.
Thanks for the presentation, and I appreciate how many hours people are putting into training for the volunteer fire service, and a lot of those hours would be driving to the provincial training center. Would if we had a regional center, would that the Nova Scotia Fire School, basically people wouldn't have to travel there to get their certification?
So currently there's multiple ways of getting their level one. A lot of fire departments take level one training locally, so we have a local training group that is put together from fire services in our county now that does a level one training program. So it follows the same criteria that the fire school follows as far as what modules they cover and the information that they cover. It's all the standard type of NFPA and ISTA manual type training, so it's all recognized level 1 firefighter basic training is what they're taking. One of the things that we have sometimes difficulty up in this area is to get like some of the specialized training that they need to finish like the level 1 training. So like hazmat operations, those kind of things, which the fire school offers. And a lot of the level 1 programs are done locally. There are some that go to the fire school, or they can do a hybrid program that was done. One was done here last year, where the fire school comes out, does a weekend of training of practical type things. They do home evaluations on themselves and training on the computer and at their own. So there's 6 to 10 hours a week minimum on those things, and then once a month they'll get together and do like the practical exercises with an instructor from the school. That is also very expensive training. Depending on which way you go with that, it's between $1,800 and $2,000 per firefighter to take that type of directed training from the fire school. Where locally, when it's being put on, currently there's no cost to the fire service to do that because the volunteers are all doing the training. So that's taxing our volunteer firefighters also that are doing the training for new and upcoming volunteer firefighters. So we're working on a scheme, and Alex might touch the bases on that a little bit on the next part of it. I don't want to get too deep in that and take away some of the stuff he's going to talk about, but that's kind of where it's at. Training, like travel time to the fire school is sometimes thought, but I think mostly is the cost per firefighter. That is really the kind of the road barrier or the barrier for firefighters to take that training. Here from one end of our training to the other end of the training, you're looking at 20 minutes to half an hour. So if we're doing a training session for our level 1s and we get to a point where we do like our live fire, so we do live fire here. So they have car, dumpster fire, extinguisher training, stuff like that in Northfield. They have some propane props. And then they have a live fire. They have 2 concrete rooms in La Have that they utilize that were engineered. And they do some smaller live fire stuff there, but you have to travel from one to the other. So usually they'll do one day and one the next day because of the half hour or whatever travel time plus lunch in it. So you lose a lot of training through that day when you have to travel back and forth. So those are some of the little things I see from it anyway.
Alex?
So included in your council package is a draft training strategy as well. The Fire Services Committee has been working on this for more than a year, and it's done in collaboration with a working group of Lunenburg Regional Fire and Emergency Services. It's a discussion paper that identifies some of the issues that are experienced by departments and the fire service in terms of training. It highlights some of the issues Chris has already mentioned in terms of cost. Travel barrier is a barrier that was identified. And then the local program, which has been highly successful but is really vulnerable because it's relying on volunteers. Bearing in mind that those are volunteers from the fire service. So this is on top of their volunteering as a firefighter. Oftentimes they're an executive officer in their departments, and then they're also volunteering as trainers on top of that. So it's clearly not a sustainable model. The paper proposes some improvements in terms of level 1 firefighter training, driver operator training, officer training, and specialized training. And it also covers some of the facility, the regional facility concept as well. So on that front, the next step would be consultation with the fire service. Following that, we'd be reaching out to our regional partners. So speaking to the neighboring towns about their interest in a regional facility. Until we have those conversations, we can't actually answer if that will remove the travel barrier to Halifax. We'd have to determine whether or not the local facility plan was enough and whether you could then provide certification. Because it's my understanding that currently only the Nova Scotia Fire School can actually provide certification of level 1 training, whereas the local program can provide all of the same training experiences, but not the actual certification. So the draft paper is in your package for your information. It will be presented at the annual meeting of the fire departments, which we are hosting next month. The 9th of April. All of council's invited to that as well. We'll be looking for input from them. The Fire Services Committee will look at it again and then make adjustments, I'm assuming, before it will come to council looking for approval.
Council should have received an email last week, I believe, from me stating that there was an annual meeting and everybody was welcome to attend.
We do have a motion related to the allocation for the budget process that we're following. So if someone would like to propose that, I would welcome it. Councillor Bell.
To Mayor McLean Weil and members of council, I move that municipal council accept the recommendation of the Fire and Emergency Services Committee and approve continued funding for a regional training facility, and that $100,000 be placed into the reserve fund in the 2025-26 budget. I so move.
Do we have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Smith. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please raise their hands. Those opposed, motion is carried unanimously. We'll move to 10.5.1, which is tipping fees for residential brush.
Thank you, Mayor. The report is included in your package. This is a matter that was brought forward to our attention by the Riverport Fire Department with a request that Municipal Council consider making arrangements for the possible waiving of tipping fees for residents that are depositing brush at the MJSB site as part of the Fire Smart program. As requested, staff took this idea to the MJSB for their staff to explore the operational impacts of the waiving of the brush fees. The MJSB staff reviewed it and brought back a positive recommendation to their board with a recommendation for municipal units to cover the costs of tipping fees for residents that are depositing brush, not only in the fire season, but for all year round. As part of that process, the MJSB board had to create a tipping fee for brush because one didn't exist separately. So that was created at $55 per metric ton. And staff at the MJSB board projected that the anticipated volume of brush that MODL would be responsible for would be about 234 metric tons, which would account to approximately $12,870 in costs. If Municipal Council is interested in pursuing the waiver of the tipping fees for residents of MODL to drop off brush at the MJSB at no cost, with that cost being covered by us in our budget, we anticipate that it would be approximately $15,000. And as Council is aware, we have included the $15,000 for this purpose in our operating budget. If this is something that Council would like to endorse, there is a motion proposed in your package. And this similar proposal is going to both the towns of Bridgewater and Mahone Bay for their councils to consider whether they would also be open to providing the covering the fees for their residents to also get the benefit of the waiving of tipping fees. The MJSB board felt that it was important to give all of the units this option so that we weren't in a position where some units were having their residents pay for the brush fees and others were not.
Could we have the motion put on the floor, please? Councillor DeLong, and then, yes, thank you.
To Mayor McLean Weil and members of council, I move that Municipal Council accept the recommendation of the Municipal Joint Services Board and cover the costs associated with waiving of tipping fees for residents of the municipality and include $15,000 in operating budget to cover the fees. I so move.
Do we have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Brooks. Discussion on the motion. All those in favor signify by raising their hand. Those opposed, motion is carried unanimously. We will move to 11.2.2, which is expropriation resolution on PID number 60592581.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is a continuation of the direction that Council has provided to staff to expropriate the lands at Broad Cove Beach bearing PID number 60592581 and registered as owners unknown on the Property Online database. The resolution that is attached in your package, attached as Schedule A to this report, is a resolution to expropriate in the form that is required by the civil procedure rules in Nova Scotia and as required under the expropriation provisions of the MGA. Following the passing of the resolution to expropriate, we'll arrange for the drafting and the filing of the expropriation documents, including the description of the land, the executed resolution to expropriate and a survey of the land, We will then proceed to file the expropriation documents and advertise the expropriation 3 times in a local newspaper. And upon third publication, we can take possession of the land. So this is nearly the end of the process. And it is one of the most significant in the sense that this is the document which will allow us to file the expropriation documents with the court to start the actual legal process of expropriation. And the resolution, while not necessary to read, is in the form that is required to be submitted to the court as part of this process.
Could we have someone put the motion on the floor? Councillor Reinhardt.
Thanks. Happy to. To Mayor McLean-Weil and members of council, I move that Municipal Council pass a resolution to expropriate the lands on Beach Road, Broad Cove, PID 605-92581, and registered as owned by owners unknown, as shown in Schedule A of the report dated March 25th, 2025. And I so move.
Do we have a seconder for the motion? Councillor Bell. Is there discussion on the motion? Councillor Brooks.
Could I just get a little cliff notes on this piece of property, please?
It is the what would commonly be referred to as the Broad Cove Beach. It's at the intersection of where the 2 roads meet, and it's on the water side. And it's listed in the property online database as owner unknown, which means that there is no legal owner registered for that property according to the registry database. We had tried to get the province to take the steps to exercise their option under owner unknown property, and they refused and suggested that if the municipality wanted to take the property, expropriation was the proper route.
Other questions? All those in favor of the motion, please indicate by raising your hand. Those opposed, motion is carried unanimously. We will move now to Finance Department 11.3.1, which is our draft operating budget update. The document we've been working on for some time. I know you even longer. Finance Director Wenzel.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I think I'll just do a quick overview for you. So Council has been reviewing your draft operating capital budgets. The last time we looked at them was March the 11th. At that time, Council directed staff to make some adjustments to the operating budget based on a list of suggested options. So the draft surplus at that time was $34,000 and revised to $71,400 based on those directions. So staff are recommending 3 more adjustments to finalize your draft operating budget so we can review it in totality on the April 1st Finance Committee. So the adjustments include increasing the Cookville sewer revenue budget by $66,000 based on new development in the service area, adopting option 3 of the REMO budget, which you had a presentation on, agreed to this morning, adjusting the Town of Lunenburg annual grant from $30,000 to $45,000, and adjusting the LCLC operating capital budgets from $1,075,000 to $1,062,000. So the attached schedule summarizes these changes with a revised operating budget surplus of $120,600. Council may direct staff to make the recommended adjustments or direct staff to make other adjustments. And whatever adjustments you make, we will review next week at the Finance Committee.
So we have the presentation, and we could just have, if there's a need for a question on clarification. I don't see we have any public input, but our discussion would follow if we had public input that wanted to respond. But Councillor Oikel, if it's a question for clarification.
Yes. Is what, just so that I understand, is what in the brackets a subtraction or an addition? Because
I think it's
because I thought we were going from 45 to 30, not the other way around, that we were taking away. And here you're stating that we're adding 2, and in the brackets down below, it shows that. I always thought the brackets meant we were taking away, which is, if we did, it does add up to 107.6. So I'm just
further through to the chair. My apologies. I'm working on the surplus. So I'm just making adjustments back to the surplus, so it's backwards from what you'd expect to see it.
Okay.
Okay?
All right.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, thank you.
The addition on, I think what you're referring to, the town of Lunenburg grant, which we have historically been 40, it was budgeted for 30. I proposed that it should, and they had requested 50, and given that we are trying to work more closely with some of our neighboring municipalities, I didn't think cutting it was a really great idea. So I proposed that we put it to the 45, which is halfway between. So we can have a discussion about that, but that was the reasoning there, why that's back in here.
Ways of confusion.
Councillor Smith?
I'm just looking at the remove added FTE contract to work out. That's around communications, right?
Yes, that's correct. That was the communications information in the administration budget.
So 30,000 is what we're saving. No,
Yes, it's 30,000 is what we're saving. So that's not, the total budget was, I think, almost 90, and so we're suggesting just take 30 out of it and contract the work out. So it would adjust it from the 90 down to 60.
So, some of that is also actually going to overtime and on-call pay as well for existing staff.
In communications. Yes.
Yes, similar to the emergency management budget, we sometimes have assistance from other departments on, for example, emergency management. So it may not all go to staff officially in communications, but they will be doing communications work. Yeah.
can I make a comment on that?
Yeah, further question.
It's not really a question, it's a comment.
Can you save it?
Yes,
Make
I
a note,
can.
and we'll save it for discussion. Yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions for clarification? Okay, thank you for that. I don't see anybody in the gallery, and we recognize that we did provide opportunities for public input as we worked our way through the budget process. And we can open this up for the general discussion, because we are getting down to the close time when we hope we're in a position to approve the budget. And but at this point, if there's general discussion or specific issues, please raise it now. So, Councillor Smith.
Yeah, and I, the director of communications, is that her position? No. Our communication staff is not here. But after what's happened in the last week or two, it's really been brought home to me the importance of having very, very strong communications and being adequately staffed for the land use planning project that's coming up. So I just want to ask the question before we finalize this budget. Are we, what would the difference of that 30,000 make? Because, yeah, the communications this week was, I think our communications staff does a great job, but we're really going to have to amp it up. And I don't know that contracting out feels as robust as we need.
Contracting out would provide for more content creation, so that would allow existing staff not to be writing as much for the Digital Digest newsletter or for the fire services newsletter, that kind of thing. It doesn't provide, so currently our staff do have to monitor social media outside of work hours. Contracting out doesn't assist with that. So that's something that we're looking at reorganizing internally to give our communications staff person a break. Having an extra body available does increase your capacity. But this was a compromise that we took direction from council on to come forward with, and we feel that it will do it will provide improvements over what we have because we'll have additional resources towards it, but it's not the same improvement as having another staff person.
And I stand to be corrected, but I think in the presentation we had from planning that there was some training up of some planning people to be involved in the public engagement piece as we go forward with planning. It doesn't, that wouldn't address the social media, but it is another set of hands and brains to work on aspects of the communication process. So I think we're all very conscious that there is a huge communication piece to this, and we're really committed to it, but I also think we are also conscious of adding additional staff positions, and that we need to be careful how we move into that. And I recognize the concern, but I think what we need to do is, can we manage with what we've got by reallocating? I think that's what staff have come back and said, we're going to try, and I think we said this, let's try this, and if we see in another year as we budget further that we need help, then we will have to do that. But I think we have to rely on them to tell us that we can manage this.
I would love to hear what other people think about this because, yeah, communications was kind of out of control last week. And it has impacts on our ability to do our work. And I just don't know that that it's going to be sufficient, and I don't want to leave us shorthanded. If we did add a full-time person, could it be a contract around the land use planning specifically, so that it's not like, because I have heard concerns from residents every time we add a person to staff, then it's very hard to ever cut back. So could you add a one-year contract or something just while we're doing the land use plan? I'm just looking for all the options.
Yeah, it's entirely possible to add term positions. We do notice a difference in quality of applicants when you're looking for a full-time versus a term position. So that's always a consideration. To the mayor's comments, planning staff are some of the staff that are more involved in communications, and they will absolutely be involved. They've taken additional training to prepare themselves for the comprehensive land use plan consultations. So it was never the plan, and still wouldn't be the plan for the communications staff to take over engagements. They would still be run as a collaboration between Sarah and the planners.
I think we have to be really careful about adding more staff. I think this has been consistently across the board an issue that residents have. And so I completely hear your concerns, and I think they're reasoned, and our experience of the last week has been, but I think we have to be really, really prudent in making a decision here. That would be my comment to this, and but I'll hear from anyone else that might want to comment. Councillor Oiko.
Yeah, I don't want to comment on that. I wanted to know whether or not our operating budget is now balanced. Like, because we have to have it balanced, right? And I just want to know.
We have a surplus of 107,000.
Right, but I just want to make sure that I'm understanding it right, because I obviously wasn't understanding it before. All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Discussion you want to raise? I would say that's it for this part. We'll see the budget come forward in the next, I think in its final version.
The next Tuesday, you'll see more communications material explaining some of the narrative, and then the final presentation is on April 8th. But we're not expecting any further revision to numbers at this point, because we need to start preparing those documents, or finish preparing those documents.
Yes, further, if I can, Madam Chair, yes, we'll have some communication documents that give council some information on what's in the budget, and so that will be helpful for you. And we will look at all of the department budgets and the capital budget just one last time next Tuesday. So it'll be a general overview, but you'll have all the budget documents, all of those beginning documents that we started with on each first meeting, you will have now in their totality for that next meeting, so you can recommend it as a committee. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. We will move to the mayor's and deputy mayor's councillor matters and the LCLC update from Deputy Mayor Vino.
Thank you, Mayor. The following is an update based on our meeting that was held last Thursday. Some of those highlights include the LCLC board is exploring ways we can stabilize the rising costs of operations, specifically utilities, and have received a presentation from renewable to retail. More details to come at a future update. The LCLC is planning for a strategic planning session this summer, which will help guide and plan for future years the success and how we can best see the LCLC grow and thrive for the community. The user feedback surveys closed on March 1st with a total of 476 responses received, which is really good. The next step is to compile a What We Heard report to evaluate the feedback and determine what changes, if any, can be implemented. The LCLC is currently developing the scope and review process for a new website to ensure it meets the needs of both public users and back-end administrators. They're also working on developing a spring advertising package for businesses and continue to work on facility naming rights. Under events, the LCLC hosted the official announcements for the upcoming 55+ games and National Para Hockey Tournament. The Gary Wenzel March Break Tournament took place from March 10th to 16th, bringing in over 30 teams and 600 players to the facility. Upcoming events, the Frost Fair and Lobster Crawl celebration that was postponed in February has been rescheduled for March 29th, and the South Shore Expo is scheduled to take place from April 11th to 13th. With regards to the budget, for the 2025-2026, MODL share is as follows. An operating grant in the amount of $958,750, capital contributions in the amount of $103,250, corrected, bringing a grand total for the 2025-2026 budget year to $1,062,000. I'll report on the year end once I have those final documents as they're being compiled, and more information regarding agendas and minutes for the board can be found at www.lclc.ca. There was questions in the past about agendas and minutes not being on the website. They are slowly filling that gap, and as of this morning, January was on there, so I will follow up with them to ensure that those who want the full reports can find them on the website.
Any questions for Deputy Mayor Vino? No? Councillor DeLong, you're next, and a comprehensive report representing all of the conference participants, so we'll welcome your report.
Thank you very much. Yes, the report that I wrote wasn't actually included in the package due to a misunderstanding, so my apologies for that, but it will be added as an addition on the website so you can review it at your leisure. It was an excellent conference. I attended with Councillors Bell and Oikel, and their thoughts are included in the written report. Here's a brief excerpt from the report. I'm very grateful I had the opportunity to attend STC. Carpooling with Councillors Oikel and Bell was a great decision. As Councillor Bell remarked, some of the best networking of the conference happened during our journey there and back. I've worked with these two for over 4 years, and now I feel like I actually know them. We arrived in Fredericton, got to work. There were many familiar colleagues there. Abhi Jain, our sustainability manager, joined us. Many familiar faces from Bridgewater and surrounding areas. There were many organizations that we already work with, such as Clean Foundation and Climate Atlantic, presenting, and the networking opportunities were phenomenal. Municipalities big and small from across the country sent elected members and staff. The speakers, panels, workshops, and study tours were all very high caliber, from the opening keynote with First Nations writer, reporter, and activist Tanya Talega, right to the closing Q&A with reporter Laura Lynch, whose podcast, What on Earth, is a weekly listen for me. A 12-page report doesn't really capture all that we learned and experienced, so if there's anybody who would like to hear more details on any of the presentations that are in the report, or to see any pictures from the slide decks of conference presenters, or to just hear about our thoughts on specific topics covered, please reach out to any of the three of us.
Thank you, Councillor DeLong. Any questions? You can read through the final report. Thank you for that. Deputy Mayor Vino.
Back again. The usual to report, chaired the Policy and Strategy Committee. I attended both Community Hub engagement sessions that were held last week at the Best Western, agenda briefings, LCLC board meeting, and all other duties as assigned as a councillor. And as I spoke earlier, this weekend will be spent supporting the Jennifer Collins Classic Tournament. I'll be volunteering there most of the weekend. If anybody wants to go, these events are a great community booster.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Vino. My report, some of which I offered this morning, but just to recap, the last 10 days have been a learning experience on public engagement. The release of the municipal planning strategy unleashed the opinion of our community on the value of small-scale agriculture, food security, protection of agricultural land, and the protection of the independence of our residents. There are several lessons learned, most importantly that we need to clearly define the steps going forward around planning, ensure we give plenty of time for our residents to understand the process, why we are doing it, and consider a revised planning document, which we committed to this morning. We know we are required to have a district-wide planning strategy, and we will not meet the deadline as outlined by the province. I'm confident of that. The risk is that if we do not complete this exercise, the province could impose a strategy, and I think that is what we would want to avoid, as well as recognize that planning is about finding that balance between the growth we are experiencing and maintaining the quality of life that we enjoy. It may take us longer than anticipated, and I remain optimistic that we can have a plan that most of our residents can live with. Not all will enjoy it or like it, but most will appreciate what we've done in trying to create a document that represents our need and their opinion. The Regional Emergency Measures Advisory Committee proposed a budget that recognized the concerns raised by one of our partners for more autonomy for their district and provides additional resources for the region. It is a compromise that secures the 5 municipal units in Lunenburg County to work together. There will be a need in the months to come to consider the governance structure and further rebalancing of the decision-making powers. The CAO committee, evaluation committee, began its work and agreed to a timetable and process under the leadership of Councillor Reinhardt that will provide more meaningful feedback to our CAO. We intend to have quarterly conversations as a committee as part of the process with an annual review using updated templates. Councillor Smith and I met with Sheila Woodcock from the Lunenburg Foundation for the Arts to explore opportunities for the foundation to partner with Modal on potential projects in the future. I attended the 2 meetings on the Community Hub, which provided useful information on the potential development of a farmer's market, the opportunities for a community kitchen, and the broader needs of our community for meeting space and co-working space for entrepreneurs working from home seemed to really resonate the most in the conversations. Many groups are looking for inexpensive meeting space for use on a monthly basis. The complication of having a multi-use space is the effective and efficient management of the space, bookings, cleanup, cleaning, all of those aspects of how you operate a community space. This will need to be viewed as an investment need to be viewed by our community as an investment in the quality of life that we have here, as we do not want to be in competition with private sector operators in the community, providing space for conferences and events. Councillor Smith and I also met with the Chief Librarian for the South Shore Regional Library. We discussed the service and programming offered by the library in our community and the limitations that they are experiencing due to lack of funding. And this is a very serious point that we need to be cognizant of. I attended the annual meeting of the Lunenburg County Christmas Tree Growers, plenty of discussion about the uncertainty facing their exports to the U.S. And of course, last night I attended the meeting regarding municipal planning strategy organized by a county resident. That is the end of my report. We will move to an in-camera session. I don't see anything else on the agenda, so we should have a motion to move in camera. Moved by Councillor Hubley, seconded by Councillor Moore. All in favor? Contrary-minded? Motion's carried. We will move in camera.